Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are not just reading a novel, we're doing something a little different. We are essentially conducting an autopsy on the birth of the modern thriller.
That's a great way to put it. We're plunging right into the meticulously constructed, and I have to say, chilling world of Wilkie Collins's The Woman in White.
And this deep dive is, well, it's engineered to go past the initial layers of suspense. You have to remember, when this book was released back in August 1860, Collins famously begged reviewers not to mention any plot details.
Oh, absolutely. He was adamant. He wanted those mysterious twists and turns, as he put it, to be completely preserved for his readers. He understood the power of suspense better than almost anyone.
So we're going to honor that, but in a different way. We're treating the narrative itself as a stack of sources, almost like a case file. A set of factual testimonies, depositions, private journals that you, the listener, have shared with us. Our mission is to look at the revolutionary structure, the shocking legal loopholes, and the just, astonishing social context that allowed a crime this audacious to even happen. We're not asking what happened, but how it was engineered.
And the novel sets its own terms right from the very beginning. That dramatic tagline, it just lays it all out. This is the story of what a woman's patience can endure and what a man's resolution can achieve.
It tells you right there, this is going to be a long, hard-won battle. It's not a quick fix.
No, it's a marathon. And the opening is just pure atmosphere, pure immediate tension. The very first piece of information we get is this sudden, strange apparition.
Right, the one our narrator, Walter Hartright, encounters on a lonely road at night. He's heading back to London, just taking one last solitary walk before his journey begins, and then this happens.
It's a moment that just defines the entire novel. He sees this figure, a solitary woman dressed from head to foot in white garments, walking completely alone after midnight.
Which is just unheard of at the time.
Completely. And she's distressed, she's clearly fleeing from some unknown menace, and her appearance is so sudden, so ghostly. It instantly signals that the polite, ordered world Hartright inhabits is about to be utterly shattered.
So this one accidental meeting, the appearance of the woman in white, it's the spark. It's the catalyst that ignites the entire central conflict of the book. It ends up directing his life, his career, his whole pursuit of justice.
It's an incredibly efficient way to hook you in. The whole story just explodes from that single mysterious moment.
So to really appreciate the story, you first have to understand that Collins was doing something fundamentally new. I mean, with the novel form itself. He completely abandoned the single omniscient narrator that, just dominated Victorian literature.
He shattered that form, absolutely. We don't just get Walter Hartright's perspective. Almost immediately, we jump to the sharp, witty, and deeply suspicious journal entries of Marian Halcombe.
And then from there.
Then we move to the formal, often dismissive legal observations of Mr. Gilmore, the family lawyer. It is a constantly shifting prism of perspective. You're never in one place for too long.
But this is more than just a stylistic choice, right? I mean, Collins was an engineer of fiction, and this structure served a very defined, almost mechanical purpose.
Precisely. The goal, as Collins himself explained it, wasn't just novelty, it was necessity.
What was the necessity?
He found that by forcing the story to be told through these written contributions from multiple sources, he compelled the narrative to keep the story constantly moving forward. If Hartright got stuck, or if his knowledge was limited...
You just jump to Marian's journal.
Exactly.
Right.
And she reveals information Hartright couldn't possibly have accessed. It keeps the pace relentless.
And critically, this gave the characters, what was the quote, a new opportunity of expressing themselves.
And that's so key. Marian's voice, in her private journal, is raw, it's opinionated, and it's fiercely intelligent. It's a voice she could never, ever use in polite Victorian conversation.
Whereas Hartright's narrative is, it's more romantic, it's focused on action and his own feelings, and Gilmore's entries are just.
Cold, legalistic, and ironically, often completely wrong in their assessments of character. He's the voice of the establishment, and the establishment is blind.
So the structure itself mirrors the whole process of detection. It forces you, the listener, to act almost like a jury, weighing all this conflicting testimony and deciding who's reliable and who's completely in the dark.
Which takes us immediately to that contrast in the reading experience. If you are listening today, you are just saturated in mystery plotting. We are trained by everything from Agatha Christie to Law and Order to spot the red flags instantly.
Oh yeah, we're experts in foreshadowing now.
And that's why reading The Woman in White for the first time today can be a profoundly, frustrating experience. We're modern readers, and we anticipate the doom long, long before the characters do.
You see all the portents so clearly. When Walter Hartright is warned that Sir Percival is dangerous, you're practically yelling at the page, listen to the warning. Just listen.
Exactly. You see the foreshadowing in the description of the ancestral estate, Blackwater Park. It's all stagnant ponds, decaying infrastructure. There's even a dead dog near the entrance when they arrive.
It all just screams corruption and decay. It's not subtle. Yet the characters, our heroes, they walk right into the trap.
And that's where the genius lies, but also that deep frustration. We end up rolling our eyes at what seems like an astonishing lack of critical thinking. How can these intelligent people like Marion and Hartright, be so naive?
It's not naivete, though, is it? That's the key.
No, it's not. They dismiss their own wariness. They decide to trust someone who is so clearly untrustworthy.
And the infuriating core of the problem is social rigidity. It's this self-paralysis of the intelligent characters. Marion suppresses her own gut instincts because, in Victorian society, to openly remain suspicious of a gentleman in his own house.
It would be a huge violation, a breach of etiquette, as the book says. It's just not done.
So this suffocating social constraint, more than any kind of stupidity, is what allows the villainy to flourish.
The polite framework of society becomes the perfect cage for the victims. It's the moment they decide that being suspicious would be impolite that they surrender their ability to act. It's a profound critique of Victorian manners, all wrapped up inside a thriller.
But Collins didn't just rely on manners to make his plot terrifying, and here's where it gets really interesting. He grounded his most sensational, his most improbable elements in absolute, documented legal fact.
He had to. For the entire plot to work, the identity swap, the false imprisonment, the legal theft of an inheritance, for any of that to be believable, the legal mechanism had to be absolutely watertight.
You can't just hand-wave that stuff away.
No. If the plot hinges on a legal loophole, that loophole cannot be invented or fuzzy. It has to be real.
I was stunned when I read the source material about his process. Collins understood that a sensation novel that relied on, implausibility would just be quickly dismissed as fluff.
So to counter that, he spared no pains to make sure he did not unintentionally mislead his readers about the law.
He went professional. He employed a solicitor of great experience, specifically to review all the legal points and all the proof sheets.
Yeah.
Every single reference to legal matters, marriage laws, property rights, institutionalization procedures, was corrected by the solicitor's hand before it ever went to print.
That is just an incredible dedication to craft. It turns a piece of fiction into a meticulously researched expose on the vulnerabilities within the actual legal system of the time.
And the rigor, surprisingly, it paid off in the real world.
It did. After the book was published and became this massive hit, the legal framework in the novel was discussed by more than one competent tribunal. And the mechanism of the crime, specifically regarding that legal identity swap and the institutionalization.
The core of the plot.
The absolute core. It was decided to be sound by high judicial authority. It wasn't just a fun plot point. It was a proven vulnerability in the law of the land.
That deep dive into the legal structure is what gives the novel its lasting power. It shows that even the most improbable fictional crime can be rooted in very real, very terrifying social structures.
And that terrifying reality leads directly to the context of real-world social trauma that almost certainly served as Collins's inspiration. We have to talk about the case of Rosina Bulwer-Lytton.
And this isn't just some random historical parallel. This scandal directly touched Collins's own artistic circle, and it happened just a few years before he wrote The Woman in White.
It was huge news. Rosina was the estranged wife of a very famous novelist and baronet, Sir Edward Bulwer-Lytton. Their separation was, it was 20 years of escalating public feuding.
A very public, very nasty split.
Oh, unbelievably so. Rosina attacked him ceaselessly, often in her own written works, painting him as a monster. The feud was famous, but the climax was just catastrophic.
In 1858, right, the whole thing just boiled over.
Yes, Rosina publicly and ferociously heckled Sir Edward while he was giving a political speech in front of all his local electors. She stood up and charged him with adultery and even murder right there in front of the whole crowd.
Oh.
Sir Edward's reaction, which was perfectly legal at the time, was devastating. He paid 2 men thugs, basically, to abduct her from her home, and he had her committed immediately to a private asylum where she was certified insane by medical professionals on his payroll.
The power imbalance is absolutely chilling. A man of rank and title could legally erase his wife, just silence her, based solely on his authority and a doctor's signature.
Exactly. But Sir Edward, he failed to keep the affair private. The scandal that erupted was so huge that it forced a re-examination of Rosina's faculties.
And she was found to be sane.
She was eventually determined to be of sound mind, but the whole incident highlighted this singularly alienating position of the married female in society.
That's the key parallel. A married woman's vulnerability to false imprisonment, to institutionalization. It wasn't sensational fiction. It was a palpable contemporary threat. Collins didn't have to invent the core idea that a powerful man could make a sane woman legally disappear.
He just had to read the newspaper. It gives Laura's eventual fate in the novel a chilling, almost documentary feel. She's victimized not because the plot is improbable, but because the law was genuinely structured to favor the husband in all matters of property and sanity.
So let's turn to the characters who drive this engine of deceit. We have to start with Walter Hartright, the man whose resolution is promised in that opening tagline. And his involvement is based entirely on a highly improbable, almost divine accident.
Right. Hartright is just a working drawing master, going about his life until he rescues this little Italian man from drowning, Professor Pesca.
And Hartright himself reflects on this later. He muses that if he had not died for Professor Pesca, he would never have even heard the name of the woman who ends up directing his entire future. The whole story hinges on that one moment of chance.
And the immediate outpouring of gratitude from Pesca is just overwhelming. Pesca sees Hartright as his savior and swears his life is now at my disposal. When Pesca shows up at Hartright's mother's house to thank him, he literally turns an armchair into an impromptu pulpit to deliver this excited, dramatic sermon about Hartright's virtues.
To this small, bewildered family audience.
Exactly. And it's from this dramatic, high-energy sermon that Hartright secures the position as a drawing master at Limmeridge House, and that introduces him to the two half-sisters who define the tragedy and the resolution, Marian Halcombe and Laura Fairley.
And they are just the ultimate female contrasts, the yin and yang of Victorian womanhood, and both of them, especially Marian Halcombe, defy simple categorization.
Oh, Marian is the intellectual, the emotional center, and the main source of resistance against the villains. Collins describes her with these striking physical details that were almost designed to shock a polite Victorian audience.
For instance, she possesses a rare beauty of her form, and we're told her figure is visibly and delightfully undeformed by stays.
Which the source material confirms was a deliberate choice by Collins. He was adamantly against corsets. He appreciated the natural female shape, so this detail suggests a natural vitality, a freedom in her.
But then you get the contradiction. She is almost swarthy, with a masculine mouth and jaw, and this prominent dark down on her upper lip that gives the chilling description almost a mustache.
Right. In a period where delicate, pale, golden-haired beauty was the absolute feminine ideal, Marian is dark, resolute, and physically imposing. She doesn't fit the mold at all.
And she's constantly referring to herself as dark and ugly and crabbed and odd, always contrasting herself with her sister. But this external lack of conventional beauty is what allows her intelligence and her sheer moral force to just shine through. She's the absolute opposite of a helpless victim.
And this complexity absolutely electrified readers, particularly men. It's amazing. Collins famously received letters from male fans who would include their social position, their income. Oh, yeah. Begging him to divulge the name of the real Marian Halcombe because they intended to propose marriage to her. They were responding to her character, her mind, her will, not her looks.
It speaks volumes about the emotional repression of the time, doesn't it? That men were so starved for genuine intelligence and resolution in a female character that they would fall in love with a woman described as having a mustache.
And that emotional connection goes deep. Many later critics have noted that Walter Hartright's affection for Marian is far deeper and more complex than just a brotherly regard.
Ah, yes. The suggestion that the final domestic arrangement, Walter, Laura, and Marian all living together, borders on a ménage à trois.
It does. She's integral to the structure of their family. She's not a third wheel. She's a cornerstone.
So then you have Laura Fairley, the woman who sets all these tragic events in motion. Hartright describes her initial effect as, fair, pretty beautiful, sweet-tempered, charming. She's the conventional ideal.
But Hartright immediately senses something wanting in her. She is aesthetically perfect, but incomplete, somehow troubled. And critics have always struggled with Laura. They often find her to be merely a ready-made victim, just entirely subject to the whims and decisions of others.
I think the most pointed critique I read came from Margaret Oliphant, who questioned how a pure-minded and ingenuous young woman should, when nothing but an effort of will seemed necessary to deliver her from the engagement, voluntarily marry one man while conscious of preferring another.
It's a very modern critique, isn't it? It's demanding agency from a character who was never designed to have it. And Collins, the clever mechanist, he refuses to solve that mystery for us.
Her internal motivations are just marginalized.
Completely. She is a portrait painted by others. She's designed to be acted upon, not to act herself. She has to be beautiful and she has to be helpless because that maximizes the horror of the crime that's eventually committed against her.
And their duality, the beautiful, helpless Laura and the ugly, intelligent Marion, it sets the stage perfectly for the third woman, Anne Catherick, the woman in white herself.
Anne's debut is just so haunting. Meeting Hartright on that high road at night, dressed from head to foot in white garments. She's initially terrified of men of rank and title, but she trusts the humble drawing master.
And her history immediately connects her back to Limmeridge. We learn she attended school there and was treated with great kindness by Mrs. Fairley, Laura's late mother. But the chilling truth is revealed a little later when Marion reads a letter confirming that Anne Catherick is the living likeness of Laura.
Hartright later seeks Anne out at Mrs. Fairley's grave and studies the resemblance meticulously. He's very analytical about it. He finds it startling in the general outline of the countenance and the figure, but he also notes that the resemblance is imperfect in the details.
What details?
Laura's youthful vitality, her purity, they're missing from Anne's worn, weary face. And this leads to a moment of just brilliant, chilling foreshadowing that hangs over the entire first half of the book.
He's forced to think that only one sad change in the future was all that was wanting to make the likeness complete.
Meaning, if Laura were to be marked by sorrow and suffering, if her spirit were broken, if her face were aged by trauma and distress, the two women would become the twin sisters of chance resemblance.
So the plot is essentially telegraphed right there. The villain's goal is going to be to inflict so much suffering on Laura that she literally becomes Anne Catherick. It's horrifying.
It's a terrifying premonition.
So with the stage set, we introduce the two great villains and watch the conspiracy take shape, starting with Sir Percival Glyde, the fiancé. And initially, he presents as the very model of a gallant gentleman.
Mr. Gilmore, the sharp family lawyer, he investigates him and is, at first, favorably impressed. He checks the reputation, finds it's above suspicion, and he feels quite easy about results.
He even dismisses that strange warning letter about Anne Catherick. He just writes it off as unhappy, common. The lawyer completely falls for the facade.
But Laura is never fooled. Even if she lacks the will to break the engagement, she's never fooled. She remains constrained and uneasy in his presence. Her one crucial act of self-preservation before the marriage is a demand she makes to the lawyer that Sir Percival cannot part me from Marion.
She gets it. She intuitively understands that isolation is the key to her subjugation.
And then the true star of the show arrives, Count Fosco. He is alarmingly large, immensely charming, and delightfully self-possessed. He is just this bundle of glorious, contradictory details that make him unforgettable.
His contradictions are so theatrical. He's this immense man who is constantly worried about catching a cold and has a wonderful delusion on the subject of swimming.
And yet he wears a blouse and a straw hat while walking his miniature pets. He carries white mice around in a gay little pagoda cage and is obsessed with petting his canaries.
All so disarming.
And his public behavior toward his wife, Madame Fosco, is a masterclass in psychological management. He habitually addresses her as my angel. He offers her sugar plums from a box in his pocket, and he kisses her hand repeatedly to appease what Marion notes as his icily jealous wife.
But Marion, she is not fooled by the theatrics for 1 second. She notes in her journal that the charm is just a distraction. The rod of iron with which he rules her never appears in company. It is a private rod and is always kept upstairs.
So Fosco uses this courtly charm as a tool of misdirection while exerting immense calculating control in private.
His true dark philosophy is revealed during a heated exchange with Sir Percival, who is often clumsy and violent. Fosco, the intellectual villain, calmly states, "The fool's crime is the crime that is found out, and the wise man's crime is the crime that is not found out."
And this is where the dynamic between the victims and villains becomes so tragically clear. Laura, who's listening nearby, quietly replies, "I believe it to be true."
She has the moral insight to recognize the reality of calculated evil, but none of the power to escape it.
That moment confirms her deep unease and her tragic understanding that the men around her are operating outside the conventional morality she was raised to follow. This foreshadows the immediate escalation at Blackwater Park, which centers on a single legal document.
Marion tries to intervene to protect Laura, urging her to read a legal paper before she signs it. And this immediately triggers Sir Percival's violent patriarchal assertion. He claims women have nothing to do with business and dismisses Marion entirely.
But Marion is not easily dismissed. She steps right in, asserting her legal right as a witness to ensure Laura understands the document. And this is what pushes Sir Percival over the edge into reckless fury. He lashes out, accusing Marion of ingratitude and telling her not to repay his hospitality by taking his wife's side against him.
So when Laura throws down the pen, stating she will sign nothing unless she has read it, Sir Percival, in his loudest and angriest tones, demands her compliance. It's just an explicit demonstration of marital tyranny.
And it is Fosco, the true mastermind, who ironically has to intervene. He maintains his perfect composure, reminding Sir Percival twice, "I remember that I am in the presence of ladies." He cools Sir Percival's passion, not out of chivalry, but because Sir Percival's recklessness threatens to expose the whole plot prematurely.
That scene is what drives Marion to her most stupendous effort. She knows they are in immediate mortal danger, and she needs proof that cannot be denied.
This is a moment of pure thriller genius. Marion undertakes the stratagem of climbing out her bedroom window onto the veranda roof in the pitch dark, in the pouring rain, just to listen to Sir Percival and Count Fosco talking in the library below.
And she meticulously records the entire conversation in her journal, a record that will later be considered utterly reliable because of its marvelous accuracy. What she hears confirms the financial motive and the imminent danger.
The motive is enormous, crippling debt. Sir Percival's debts are enormous, and he desperately needs his wife's £20,000, plus the remote chance of another $3,000 a year when her uncle, Mr. Fairley, dies. The financial incentive for murder is absolutely clear.
And that's when Fosco calmly introduces the plot that shocks even the reckless Sir Percival. He just says, let's say your wife dies before the summer is out, which solves the debt problem immediately.
But the complicating factor is Anne Catherick. Fosco recognizes the risk. Anne is the living likeness of Laura and is now in communication with Lady Glyde, which means Laura now knows the secret.
The secret being the forgery that underpins Sir Percival's identity, though Marion doesn't know that specific detail yet.
Right. And the conspirators realize they have to act immediately because Hartright, who Fosco correctly suspects is sweet on my wife, has helped Anne Catherick escape and likely knows the secret, meaning the information is about to be used against them. The swap has to happen now.
The conspirators move with just ruthless, horrifying efficiency. Marion, having been thoroughly drenched by the heavy rain during her eavesdropping, is quickly taken ill with a severe cold, which Fosco, very conveniently, diagnoses as typhus fever.
So she's rendered immediately helpless. She can't warn Laura.
And this isolates Laura, which was her greatest fear from the beginning. Laura is then deceived into believing Marion has recovered and has traveled on ahead to Limmeridge. This forces Laura to travel alone to London, where she is instructed to rest at her aunt's house, who just happens to be Madame Fosco in St. John's Wood.
And now the swap occurs. Fosco executes the deception with clinical precision. He meets the real Lady Glyde at the terminus, driving her immediately to the house where Anne Catherick has just died, also very conveniently, of an aneurysm.
The paperwork is quickly rearranged. Anne Catherick is buried under the name of Laura, Lady Glyde. The epitaph on the tombstone is false, the death certificate is false, and the whole mechanism is sound because the body is physically identical enough to pass cursory inspection in an age before forensics.
Fosco reflects on this ingenuity later, boasting, "At immense personal sacrifice, I followed the dictates of my own ingenuity and took her identity instead." He genuinely views the crime as a masterpiece of calculated risk and deception.
And the real Lady Glyde.
She is then taken to the private asylum by Fosco, where she is forced into the identity of Anne Catherick. The proprietor of the asylum even notes curious personal changes in the patient when she's brought back, but he just attributes them immediately to changes in her existing mental affliction. Because of the original identity, the swap is easy to confirm through existing false records.
So the legal framework immediately shields the conspirators. When Hartright returns to London, Marion has to confirm the bitter truth. Legally, they have not the shadow of a case.
In the eye of the law, Laura is dead and buried. Hartright and Marion are just viewed as accomplices of a madwoman who is claiming the identity of a dead noblewoman.
They're completely marginalized. They're seen as the dupes and the agents of a daring imposture. Hartright, however, he understands the legal mechanism of the death certificate. He resolves to discover the exact date of Laura's journey to London.
Right, because he believes the conspirators might have been forced to bring her to London one day after Anne Catherick's death certificate date, which was July 25th. If he can prove the date of travel, he proves she's alive.
But the true breakthrough comes from a monumental pivot. Hartright's obsessive deep dive into Sir Percival's shadowy history. He travels all the way to Old Welmingham Church and finds the parish register from 1803, searching for the record of Sir Percival's father's marriage.
The marriage that would legitimize Sir Percival's baronetcy and his name.
And he finds that the entry is missing. The marriage was never officially entered in the register. And this is the ultimate secret. Sir Percival Glyde was the illegitimate son of a man who did not marry his mother, and therefore the baronetcy, the name, and the estates were never rightfully his.
This revelation is the explosive core of the entire conspiracy. It explains everything retroactively. Hartright realizes the gravity of it instantly. The disclosure would deprive him, at one blow, of the name, the rank, the estate, the whole social existence that he had usurped.
So this is why he was so desperate for Laura's money. It explains the imprisonment of Anne Catherick, who was the daughter of the woman who knew the secret. It explains his frantic shifts between abject duplicity and reckless violence.
He was always one step away from total ruin and possible transportation for forgery.
Having discovered the truth, Hartright's next move is essentially forced by Sir Percival's desperation. Hartright is followed by a lawyer's clerk, so he knows the jig is up. Sir Percival, knowing he's discovered, is seen fleeing into the vestry of Old Welmingham Church, intent on destroying the register, which is the only surviving proof of his fraud.
And the end is just violently cinematic. Sir Percival becomes trapped inside the vestry when the old lock jams. Hartright and the others outside can only hear the quickening crackle of the flames and the sharp snap of the glass.
Sir Percival Glyde is burned to death in the resulting fire, consumed by the consequences of his own forgery.
And you get that final, chilling touch of poetic justice. A letter arrives from Mrs. Catherick, Anne's mother, the woman Sir Percival wronged decades earlier to protect his secret. She thanks Hartright, writing that his inquiries have, without his intention, served the hatred and wreaked the vengeance of 23 years.
So with Sir Percival eliminated, the focus shifts to the intellectual mastermind, Count Fosco. And Hartright learns that the key to Fosco's undoing is the last person you'd ever suspect.
His old friend, Professor Pesca, the man Hartright saved from drowning at the very beginning of the book.
It's the ultimate payoff for that lucky, improbable accident in the opening pages. Pesca, this little, easy, cheerful man, is the one person Fosco fears more than the law.
Hartright traces Fosco to the opera, where Pesca instantly recognizes him and just recoils with genuine, visceral terror.
And Pesca, forced to explain, reveals the existence and the incredibly severe code of his secret Italian political brotherhood. This is where the plot structure comes full circle, tying the villain to an even darker, more ruthless system of justice.
The Brotherhood operates on a unique set of laws. Members are strangers to one another, identified only by a secret mark they all bear, a mark that lasts for life. More importantly, their code warns that traitors die either by the hand of a stranger or a friend. There is no escape from their justice.
So Hartright leverages this terrifying fact. He confronts Fosco, not with the police, but with the threat of the Brotherhood. He has a letter sealed, addressed to Pesca, detailing Fosco's existence and location, with instructions for Pesca to open it if Hartright doesn't return safely.
Fosco, absolutely terrified of the long arm of the Brotherhood, confesses the entire plot to Hartright. He writes it all down, thereby securing the legal facts needed for Laura's restoration.
In exchange, Hartright gives Fosco a window to flee to Paris, believing he's solved the problem.
But the Brotherhood is inescapable. Fosco's body is later identified in the Paris morgue. He was taken out of the Seine, disguised as a French artisan. He had been stabbed exactly over his heart.
And the final, brutal signature.
2 cuts in the shape of a T were found on his left arm, obliterating the mark of the Brotherhood. The T signifies traditore, Italian for traitor. The assassin was revealed to be a light-haired foreigner with a scar on his cheek. A member of the Brotherhood admitted after Pesca had left Italy. Justice, in its most final and non-legal form, had been done.
So with both villains removed by their own internal mechanisms, one by fire, one by political vengeance, the legal path finally opens up for Hartright to secure the evidence proving the fraud.
The structure is complete. Mr. Fairley, Laura's cynical and hypochondriacal uncle, conveniently dies from paralysis after the shock of all these recent events. Laura's property transfers, and she is fully restored to her identity, triumphantly re-entering Limmeridge House.
And Hartright, having earned his resolution through immense perseverance in detective work, marries Laura. But their life is not the traditional domestic Victorian sphere, is it? It's that cohabitating power trio we alluded to earlier.
Marian Helcom remains the foundational member of their new family. She vows never to part from them, looking forward to their new life together and stating with her characteristic force, "Wait a little till there are children's voices at your fireside. I will teach them to speak for me. We can't spare our aunt."
So Marian's resolution is rewarded, and Laura's patience endures a trauma that nearly destroys her identity. But this brings us back to that original structural critique.
Right. The Dublin University magazine, writing shortly after the book's release, found the novel's merits disproportionate to its popularity. They claimed Collins had woven a tissue of scenes more wildly improbable than the fancy of an average idealist would have ventured to inflict on readers.
That's the classic challenge for any sensation novel, isn't it? Does the sensationalism overwhelm the art? Did Collins just prioritize shock over credibility?
But think about what we just discussed. The meticulous documented detail of the legal points, the rigor that made the mechanism of the swap sound and terrifyingly real, and the complex shifting narrative structure which forces the listener to become the ultimate detective. All of that validates the novel's method.
It feels like Collins was arguing that structure, documentation, and the rigorous exploitation of social and legal loopholes can overcome the charge of wild improbability. The sensational events are terrifying because they were legally possible.
The triumph of Marian's intelligence and Walter's perseverance ultimately validates the power of that structure over mere sensationalism. The journey to justice, though it's convoluted, is necessary because the system itself was designed to facilitate the crime.
And so for you, the learner, the provocative thought to carry forward from all this is, well, it's this. If the most improbable sensational events in fiction are so often rooted in meticulously documented, verifiable realities, as Collins proved, how much latent villainy is currently hiding in the boring, unexamined loopholes of our own modern systems and structures?
A truly unsettling thought to end on. Thank you for taking this deep dive into the dark secrets of the woman in white.